You are not who you think you are. Beneath the polished surface you present to the world, behind the smiles, the titles, the carefully constructed identity, there is something darker, a primal force, the part of you you've spent your life ignoring. It whispers in your dreams, it seethes in your envy. It lashes out when you're tired, scared, or pushed too far. Carl Jung called this part of you the shadow, and he believed that unless you face it, it will consume you. This is the story of Jung's most dangerous idea, and how confronting your darkness might be the only way to become whole. You wear a mask, not out of deceit but necessity. Society expects it. It applauds your pleasantness, your restraint, your civility. The world has little tolerance for chaos, impulse, or rage, so you bury it. You smile instead of scream. You agree instead of challenge. You conform instead of confront. But every mask you wear casts a shadow behind it. And according to Carl Jung, that shadow doesn't disappear. It waits, it festers, it grows stronger in the dark. This is the essence of the shadow, not a devilish figure from mythology, but a psychological truth about what happens to the parts of ourselves we repress, deny, or disown. For Jung, becoming a fully developed human being, what he called individuation, required far more than growing in intelligence or virtue. It required facing the very things you fear most about yourself. It required owning the inner chaos, not erasing it. Jung began by observing how people construct what he called the persona, the mask or identity we present to the world. It's the role we play, the good student, the loyal spouse, the friendly neighbor, the respected professional. The persona is not inherently fake or deceptive, it's a tool for social survival. But there's a cost. The more attached we become to our persona, the more we forget that it is not the totality of who we are. In fact, the traits that don't fit the image we want to present, the aggression, jealousy, lust, weakness, arrogance, are pushed out of awareness. They become the shadow. The shadow is not just evil. It's anything incompatible with your self-image. A devout priest may repress sexual desire. A pacifist may bury violent rage. A perfectionist may deny laziness. The shadow is unique to the individual, but universal in structure. Early in his career, Jung was a close disciple of Sigmund Freud, but Freud's theory reduced much of the unconscious to a seething cauldron of repressed sexual impulses and past traumas. For Freud, the goal of therapy was to bring these buried elements into consciousness and neutralize them. Jung saw something deeper. For him, the unconscious was not just a repository of shameful urges. It was also the seat of creativity, intuition, and transformation. And crucially, he believed that the shadow was not something to be exercised, but integrated. This was a dangerous idea. It meant that people weren't just victims of inner darkness, they were also participants. Every human being was complicit in their own fragmentation. The shadow, Jung believed, had to be faced like a mirror, not smashed like a monster. Jung wasn't talking about serial killers or violent criminals. He was talking about you. The well-mannered teacher who gossips about students after class. The nurturing mother who resents her child's neediness. The peaceful activist who secretly fantasizes about violent retribution. These contradictions don't make you bad, they make you human. But when we refuse to admit them, they don't go away. They leak, they project. We begin to see the shadow in others, the idiots, the monsters, the immoral, while maintaining our own innocence. This projection is the psychological engine behind racism, political polarization, witch hunts, cancel culture, scapegoating. Jung wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." But few want that understanding. Most would rather wage war on the shadow outside than confront it within. To understand how seriously Jung took the integration of the shadow, we must look not just at his theories, but at his life. In 1913, Jung was at the peak of his success, a respected psychiatrist, Freud's heir apparent. But inside, something was breaking. That year, Jung began to experience what he called a confrontation with the unconscious. He was haunted by terrifying visions, rivers of blood, oceans of fire, descending into darkness. Rather than dismiss these as psychosis, Jung did something radical. He followed them. This period, between 1913 and 1917, became the most important of his life. He withdrew from the world, reduced his clinical work, and embarked on a private, inner journey that would later be documented in a mysterious, illustrated manuscript called the Red Book. The Red Book is not a clinical manual. It reads more like a mythological text, filled with strange dialogues, surreal imagery, archetypal figures, and inner battles. It chronicles Jung's descent into the unconscious, his own personal underworld. He met characters within himself, not just symbols, but personified aspects of his own psyche. The most famous was Philemon, a wise old man who served as Jung's inner guide. Jung believed Philemon represented a deep, archetypal wisdom that came not from his conscious mind, but from the collective unconscious. Through these visions, Jung began to understand the complexity of the shadow. It was not just animalistic darkness, it was also the gateway to transformation. He realized that the very traits we suppress, if confronted, could lead to greater wholeness. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This line from Jung is often quoted, rarely lived. He meant it literally. You cannot grow by denying your inner demons. You grow by facing them, dialoguing with them, and learning from them, even if it breaks you. One of the tools Jung developed during this period was active imagination, a method of deliberately engaging with the unconscious. Unlike dream interpretation, this was a waking process. Jung would sit down, let his mind drift, and allow images to arise. Then he would engage them, speaking with them, questioning them, arguing with them. He believed these figures, like Philemon or the dark feminine Salome, were not hallucinations but autonomous parts of the psyche. This was dangerous territory. Jung often feared he was losing his mind. But he came to believe that these inner figures were part of what he later called the self, the totality of the psyche. And integration required listening, not silencing. The shadow was often the first figure to appear in active imagination, the neglected, wounded, or violent inner being. Most people recoil, Jung leaned in. Many ancient myths depicted descent into the underworld, from Orpheus to Dante to Christ. Jung saw this not as religious dogma but psychological metaphor. To grow, you must descend. You must die to your illusions. You must let go of who you think you are. The shadow is the guardian of the threshold. Most never pass it. They turn back in fear. But those who continue, who face the shadow, feel its rage, accept its presence, emerge transformed. Jung survived his descent, but he was never the same. He emerged not just with theories, but with wisdom. The integration of the shadow was no longer a concept. It was a rite of passage. Having faced his own shadow, Jung began to develop a larger model of psychological development, individuation. This was the process of becoming a whole person, not a perfect person, but a unified one. And at the heart of individuation was integration of the shadow. But what does integration mean? It does not mean giving in to every dark impulse. It does not mean becoming cruel or immoral, nor does it mean overcoming the shadow in a heroic battle. Integration means acknowledging the shadow as part of yourself, not something alien or shameful. One of Jung's key insights was that we must distinguish moral judgment from psychological truth. Let's say you're a compassionate person. You pride yourself on your empathy. But deep down, you also feel moments of hatred, especially toward people who trigger your insecurities. You suppress it, you pretend it's not there. Not only that, but you keep being nice. Jung would say, this is dangerous. Not because hatred is good, but because denying it makes it stronger. You start projecting it onto others. You see the world as increasingly hostile. Not only that, but you grow self-righteous. You lose nuance. You forget that you too are capable of cruelty. Integration means saying, yes, I am capable of hatred. That is part of me. And from that truth, you can choose how to act, not from repression, but awareness. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Jung saw the shadow everywhere in culture. In myth, it appears as the dragon, the devil, the underworld god. In literature, it's Mr. Hyde, Gollum, Darth Vader. In film, it's Tyler Durden or the Joker. These figures are not just villains. They represent the parts of the hero that must be confronted. Luke Skywalker faces the dark side within himself. Frodo battles the corruption of the ring. Dr. Jekyll becomes Hyde. Jung believed these stories weren't just entertainment. They were psychic maps. They show that the path to growth always leads through darkness. Western culture often promotes the idea of being a good person, kind, polite, generous, fair. But Jung warned that this moral ideal, when pursued without self-knowledge, creates neurosis. You become good on the outside, while your inner world festers with resentment and shame. Jung didn't advocate immorality, he advocated wholeness. A person who knows their shadow, who has faced it, is less likely to be manipulated by it. They don't lash out when challenged. Furthermore, they don't need to prove their virtue. This is the paradox. Facing your inner darkness makes you more trustworthy, not less, because you're no longer controlled by it. Now we come to the most important part, your shadow. This isn't just a lecture on Jung's theories or a psychological curiosity. The integration of the shadow is not a philosophical exercise. It is a personal, terrifying, liberating confrontation, and one you cannot outsource. The truth is, everyone has a shadow. You are no exception. The only question is whether it is in your control, or you are in its control without knowing it. How do you begin to identify your shadow? Start by paying attention to your emotional reactions, especially strong, negative ones. Who do you hate? Who irritates you? Who do you feel morally superior to? Who do you envy? These are not random, they are mirrors. That coworker you call lazy? Maybe you're projecting your own fear of failure. That influencer you call narcissistic? Maybe you're denying your own hunger for recognition. That political group you label evil? Maybe they embody a side of you that you cannot admit exists. Projection is the shadow at work. It allows us to judge others harshly while remaining blind to our own inner contradictions. Jung wrote, "The more unaware we are of the shadow, the blacker and denser it is. And this is crucial. The shadow is not just personal. It is collective. Nations, religions, political movements all carry collective shadows. The traits a group refuses to acknowledge in itself are often projected onto outsiders. History is littered with examples: genocides, witch hunts, moral panics, ideological purges. Each began with the belief, we are good, they are evil. This is how normal people commit atrocities, not because they are monsters, but because they have disowned their own capacity for cruelty and projected it outward. This is why Jung warned against ideological certainty. The more righteous a movement appears, the more likely it is haunted by a disowned shadow. The healthy man does not torture others. Generally, it is the tortured who turn into torturers. In this light, integrating the shadow is not just personal therapy. It is a moral responsibility. A society that represses its darkness will become more violent, not less. So how do you begin? This is not a one-time process. It is lifelong. But there are tools grounded in Jung's work that can help. 1. Shadow journaling. Write honestly about your most unacceptable thoughts and feelings. Don't censor. Don't moralize. Don't try to fix it. Just write. What do you envy in others? What traits in others do you judge most harshly? What are you afraid people would discover about you? When do you pretend to be something you're not? Be raw. Be unfiltered. You are not confessing to a priest. You are facing yourself. 2. Dream analysis. Jung believed that the unconscious communicates through symbols, especially in dreams. Write your dreams down. Look for recurring figures or scenarios. Often, the shadow appears as a threatening person, animal, or force. Don't dismiss it. Try dialoguing with it. Ask, what part of me does this represent? What is it trying to say? 3. Active imagination. This is more advanced but powerful. Enter a meditative state. Let an image arise, maybe a dark figure or a place. Instead of observing passively, speak to it. Ask it questions, listen, write the dialogue down. You are not inventing. You are discovering. Jung did this with terrifying clarity. He would ask the shadow, who are you? Why are you here? What do you want? Sometimes it would lie, sometimes it would rage, but eventually it would speak truth. 4. Creative expression, art, music, poetry, dance all allow the shadow to be expressed safely. This is why so many great artists have dark themes in their work. They are not promoting darkness, they are releasing it. Write a story where your shadow is a character. Paint an image that scares you. Compose music that feels chaotic. The point is not beauty, it is honesty. 5. Watch for projection throughout your day. Notice your judgments of others. Pause and ask, is this really about them or about me? Don't excuse others' bad behavior. But also don't ignore the part of you that may be reacting from the shadow. If you hate arrogance, ask where you are proud. If you hate weakness, ask where you are afraid. If you hate cruelty, ask where you are unkind. This is brutal work. It feels like betrayal, but it's actually integration. You may say, I try to be a good person. Isn't that enough? No, good intentions are important, but insufficient. The shadow does not care what you mean. It cares what you deny. You may try to be generous, but resent people who ask for help. You may be peaceful, but rage inside at every injustice. You may be spiritual, but look down on those who aren't. This is how the shadow fools you, by hiding beneath virtue. Jung saw this clearly. The brighter the light you shine, the darker the shadow behind you. The more you seek purity, the more you risk hypocrisy. This doesn't mean abandoning morality. It means anchoring it in self-knowledge. Not all that is repressed is evil. Sometimes we repress our power. You may have been taught to be small, to be humble, to not want too much, so you buried ambition, assertiveness, confidence. These two are part of the shadow. Integrating the shadow doesn't just heal wounds, it unlocks potential. The energy you spent repressing yourself is now free. The repressed artist paints again, the passive child becomes a leader. The silenced woman speaks. This is not ego, it is wholeness. Jung said, I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become. But you cannot choose until you know what is inside you. The shadow holds your pain, but also your power. Let's be honest. This is hard. Most people will not do it. Why? Because it destroys illusions. It shatters identities. It humbles the ego. To confront your shadow is to admit that you are not always kind, not always wise, not always right. It means revisiting trauma, rethinking values, revising stories you've told yourself for decades. Most people prefer comfort over truth. And so, the shadow grows in the dark. But for those who face it, something extraordinary happens. They become real, not perfect, not enlightened, but whole. They stop needing to prove themselves. They stop being owned by shame. They stop projecting their pain onto the world. They become grounded, quietly powerful, capable of love because they are no longer afraid of their own depth. The shadow will never fully disappear. Jung never claimed it would. You don't integrate the shadow once and for all. You dance with it for a lifetime. Some days it will whisper, other days it will roar. But if you listen, if you remain in relationship with it, it will not consume you. Instead, it will become your ally, your muse, your teacher. And one day, perhaps when someone asks who you are, you will no longer need to lie or posture or pretend. You will simply smile and say, I am everything I am and everything I once feared to be.